Hi folks, my name is Matt, aka the UKAstroNut. I'm going to be carrying on my series today of the planets, and I'm going to be moving up, planets in the solar system. I'm going to be moving one planet along the stage. So we did the Sun, which is the star at the centre of our solar system. Then I did a video on Mercury, and now I'm on to Venus, and Earth is next. So you probably know quite a lot about Earth already. So this is a more interesting one anyway. So today I'm going to be talking about Venus, as I said. I'm just going to give you lots and lots of facts about Venus and tell you some of the really interesting things about it. It's a really interesting planet. It's actually the hottest planet in our entire solar system. Now, it's really close to the Sun for a start, but actually there's a planet closer, which I said in the last video, which is Mercury. But as I said before, the reason that Venus is hotter than Mercury is because it actually has a really thick atmosphere, unlike Mercury. Now, the reason why the Earth is so warm as well is because the Earth has an atmosphere. So what happens is, when the light and the heat from the Sun comes in to, say, Mercury, it hits the surface of Mercury and it'll warm up a little bit, then that heat just escapes straight back out again. It's radiated all the way around. So all the heat, a lot of the heat leaves Mercury. However, with Venus what happens is the energy comes in and it hits the surface of Venus, and some of it escapes out, but some of it's held in by the atmosphere, the kind of greenhouse effect, if you've heard this before. And so a lot of the energy and the heat is kept in Venus, unlike with Mercury. And so Venus actually gets hotter than Mercury. It's just one of the really interesting facts. So Venus, as I said before, has a really thick atmosphere. And this atmosphere is actually mainly made of carbon dioxide. So as humans, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Around 99 or something like that % of Venus's atmosphere is actually carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide is one of the main things in this greenhouse effect, and it really keeps in the heat very well. We actually think that Venus at one point probably had an atmosphere that was quite similar to Earth's. It may have had oxygen and nitrogen and things like this, and it may have even supported life at some point. It possibly had liquid water on the surface. But what happened was that the greenhouse effect caused a lot of the water to be evaporated off of Venus because it was so hot. And also, there are a lot of volcanoes. Venus is very volcanic, it has lots and lots of volcanoes, much more than Earth, and they're erupting a lot more. And this spews out loads of gases and carbon dioxide and things into the atmosphere. And so this makes it theoretically probably unlikely to be able to support life because the atmosphere isn't very good, isn't very sort of healthy. We think that a lot of organisms and things, like humans or bacteria and things, probably need oxygen and other things, and the amount of carbon dioxide and the heat in Venus probably isn't that suitable for life, but we're not entirely sure. So what about the actual, what is Venus like? What's its size and everything compared to Earth, for example? So in my lovely handy dandy whiteboard, I'll give you some just key pointers. So the size of Venus is very similar to that of Earth. So the actual radius, the physical size, is very similar. But actually it's about 0.8 times, so 4/5 the mass of Earth. So if you were to weigh them, it would weigh about 4/5 as less. And this is just because it's less dense than Earth. So Earth has a really dense metal core and then very dense sort of rock around the outside and liquid rock and things like this. And Venus must have very similar, but not as dense. There's not as much material compressed into all that area. So a year on Venus lasts 225 Earth days. So what you find is, as you go closer to the Sun than the Earth, the planets have less, the years are shorter compared to Earth. So it takes them less time to go around the Sun. And as you go further out, they get much larger. So 1 year is 225 Earth days, and one solar day, so that's the time for the Sun to come up over the horizon and then to come back again. So the Sun rises, sets, then rises again. That's one solar day is 117 days. But a day is actually technically defined in a slightly different way. So a day is actually determined by the time it takes for the planet to orbit, to rotate once around. So if you imagine you have a planet like this, and what happens is in one day the planet rotates around in one complete rotation. Now this time is actually different from the solar day. It's very confusing, but actually the time it takes for it to rotate around is around 240 days. I said it's 117 for the time it takes for a sun to go around. Now on Earth, one day takes 24 hours, so one day, but on Venus it takes 240 days, which is really confusing because it takes a year on Venus is 225 days, but a day is 240. So the length of a day is actually longer than it takes for an entire year, because Venus just rotates very slowly, but goes around the sun a bit quicker. So the reason that the solar day is actually different is because as it's going around the sun, you're also getting the effect of the sun moving position compared to where Venus is, and it rotating very slowly. So it's very confusing, but basically Venus rotates very slowly, so much so that a year is actually shorter than a day on Venus, and it causes very confusing things. So you imagine that basically one day is 117 days, which means the sun is continuously up for half of that time. Nearly 60 days the sun just takes come all the way up. It takes 60 days from sunset to sunrise, which is very, very confusing. It's also that Venus is also interesting because unlike the rest of the planets in the solar system, it rotates clockwise around its axis. So again, as I said, a planet rotates around, and that causes a day, and they normally rotate. But Venus actually rotates in the other direction. And we think this is probably because at some point in the past, Venus, we think, was probably rotating the same way, anti-clockwise, as the rest of the planets do. But something probably collided into it. And what that did was to knock it in the other direction, start spinning it in the wrong way. Which is probably why Venus rotates so slowly, because it was going quite fast one direction and it just got knocked enough to rotate the other direction, but it did it very, very slowly. So this is why we think that Venus is like this. So Venus doesn't actually have any moons, but it has some mini asteroids and things that are around it that are leading in front of it and behind it. But it doesn't actually have any sort of known moons that we know of anyway. So it has a very, very dense atmosphere. So much so that we've actually landed some things on Venus, but the atmosphere is so dense that actually what happens is as the landers go into the atmosphere, they actually get crushed. There's so much pressure in the atmosphere of Venus. We've landed some things on the surface. We eventually managed to build things that were sturdy enough to actually land them. But a lot of the things originally that went through, they just got crushed down because it was just so much pressure. So yeah, that's basically Venus. It's not a very nice place. It's very, very hot. The atmosphere is very, very dense. And also days on Venus last 10, 60 odd days here on Earth, which is a very, very long time. It's really going to mess up your sleeping pattern. So Venus is definitely one of the more interesting planets in the solar system for a number of these reasons. I hope you find it interesting. I do anyway. There's lots more interesting things to learn about. I'm going to do more and more videos on them. Next is Earth, which will probably be a very interesting video because we all live here and we should probably know something about Earth. But I'll try and find some things that maybe you don't know about Earth anyway. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave comments, and I'll see you guys later.